Hello, Chicago Children's Choir. I am so happy to be with you. My name is Ellie Pai Hong, proud board member of the Chicago Children's Choir, and I'm so happy today to be talking to Santita and Yusef Jackson. Welcome. So great to see you guys.
Wonderful to be here.
Santita, I can see that you're on the set of your radio show, which I'll be telling the kids about in just a little second. But so great to see you. So great to see your beautiful faces. As everyone knows, Santita and Yusef Jackson are the oldest daughter and youngest son of revered Chicago civil rights activists and changemakers, Reverend Jesse and Jacqueline Jackson. Santita Jackson is a professional singer, television and radio host, writer, actor, motivational speaker, and political commentator. And as you can see from her background, she also has a show, the Santita Jackson Show, on News Web Radio Progressive Station, WCPT, 820 AM. And Jackson, and Yusef Jackson, little brother, he is also a very successful Chicago business leader, community developer, real estate investor, and also a proud member of the Chicago Children's Choir's Board of Directors. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
I guess the first question I'd love to ask you, and I'm so curious about this, is what was it like growing up as a children of Reverend Jesse Jackson? You know, you hear so much from like movie stars' kids and they say, well, you know, that's just my mom, that's my dad. I don't even watch them on the screen. But for you guys, he made sure that you, along with the entire family, walk the talk of service. But I'm sure with that exposure and experience came a lot of expectation as well.
Santita, you can start this one.
Okay, well, you know, it's important to, number one, thank you for being here. We love the Chicago Children's Choir, and I was a member for a short time when I was in high school, so I have a very soft spot in my heart for this wonderful organization. That having been said, we are the children of Reverend Jesse and Mrs. Jacqueline Jackson. And one of the things I think it's very important to bring that to fore, because our father was on the road a great deal of the time, because that's part of his mission, his work. He had to be out of town. And it was left to our mother, is a tremendous activist in her own right. In fact, that was one of the qualities that attracted him to her when they were in college. It was left to her to interpret the civil and human rights movement in Chicago, in the United States and around the world. And she did a wonderful job of doing that, but they did that together. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful experience that, quite frankly, they were very deliberate. I think Yusef could say that they were very deliberate in making life very normal for us, even though we grew up with heightened security around the house because of the nature of his work. You had people who were very threatening. And so that's something that we grew up with all of our lives. But these people became part of the family. And they emphasized the importance of service, the importance of the work that they were doing for others. So you didn't feel like you were missing anything, and we certainly did not feel that we were the children of celebrities. You know, not at all. We felt that he was someone who was of service. You saw him on television for sure, but that was a function of his work. And our mother was making sure that we understood the issues. I mean, we had to read the newspaper every day. We had to read Time and Newsweek and The Economist and things like that. As children, you needed to really put your nose in the encyclopedia. You needed to know what was going on in the world. And so, and it was a joint effort. You know, Yusef?
Yeah, you know, thank you, Santita, for that. You know, it's kind of funny because my sister is a bit older than me. So we actually grew up probably in two different households. And she was more she kind of paved the way for me so that my life would actually be much easier. So the life she lived was very different than the life I lived. I lived a charmed life relative to the life that my sisters and brothers before me had to live at some level. They, you know, it was a beautiful time to grow up. And my parents, I think, did an excellent job with what they had. You have to understand, and I want to tell this to the choir so they really understand. When we were growing up, my father was as well known as any of the top 5 people in the world. If at the time you could think of, do you know who the Pope is? Or do you know who the President of the United States is? Or do you know who Martin Luther King is? You could also say at the time that you knew and you could recognize Reverend Jesse Jackson. And at the time, everybody, there were only 5 or 6 television stations that you would watch. And it was a good chance that at any given night, my father was on one or all of them. So we grew up in a very, very public fashion. We didn't have the social media that you have access to now, but it was a very public household, and we were under a microscope. So it was a very high pressured environment, and our parents had high expectations of us, but their expectations of us were not because we were public or because we were famous. That isn't true at all. In fact, I felt no public pressure from my parents. We lived a very organic life in that sense. We never talked about the public stuff, but my parents had high expectations from themselves because they both grew up in single parent households. Both of my parents grew up adopted with single mothers working every day. So, and from that deep Southern tradition in South Carolina for my father, and Florida and Virginia for my mom, to get out of that tough situation, the economics they had to endure, it took a lot of intestinal fortitude, and that they instilled on us. So we had to read every day. We were challenged in vocabulary. We were challenged in mathematics, all the little things. We grew up in just with a sense of excellence, and that carried through to the work that we do even right now.
If I could add to this, Ellie, Yusef, and thank you so much for that, because Yusef and I are 7 years apart, which I think in family years is like a generation almost. But we grew up with the same values. When I was on my way to Whitney Young there was no Northside Prep. There was no Jones was a commercial high school for people who aspired to go into the business world as secretaries and such. So getting into Whitney Young was a very, very big deal because everybody wanted to go there. And, but I was very aware that my getting in could be a public issue. So I needed to make sure in my own mind that my test scores were excellent. And my mother told me that was her expectation of me also, because our mother would get us tested, right, Yusef? So that she could know where we were intellectually, academically, emotionally. And then as I went to Whitney Young, she said, I need you to finish at the top of your class, because as Yusef said, what came along with our father's, just with his fame, was unlike the Pope and unlike these other figures, he was also someone who was very controversial. And so he was someone who was in the spotlight, someone who was threatened all the time. And so my mother told me I needed to get scholarships to school because I need you to be able to pay for it. And many people don't think of us that way, but I needed to set a pace for Yusef and for Jackie and for Yusef and for Jonathan and for Jesse. And, but it all worked out. I mean, it wasn't anything tragic. Let me put it this way. It helped us to develop some muscles that we might not otherwise have developed had we had it easier, if you will.
I think I read a quote that said the Reverend raised you guys with spiritualism, not materialism, right? Yes. And then you, Santita, you got that scholarship for college. You got a National Merit Scholarship to fund that college education. But I can't imagine the dinner table at the Jackson family, like, who brings up a political discussion and what can you say?
Ellie, let me tell you about the materialism versus, what was it, spiritualism? Is that what he said? I don't remember the quotes, but I remember the concept. Let me tell you, it was very common for me to take an ironing board and an iron and a patch with that gummy stuff on the back and patch and iron and patch over holy jeans that my brothers had passed down from me. We would stitch up our socks when they had holes in them. We were a hand-me-down kind of family. My mom put everything, and I don't if the kids know what this means, on layaway. We'd buy clothes and she'd put down 10 or 20% of the money. We'd take the clothes and she'd have to go back to the stores, the Marshalls, the J.C. Penney's, the Searses, and pay off the debt. We lived like that through the 80s for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned to sew. So, because that would defray my expenses too. But, it was great.
So my father often says, you don't recognize Dr. King for a fancy car or a fine
Yeah.
pair of shoes. You recognize him for his character and what he stood for. And as we think about, and listen, I love fashion. I think we all love and have a sense of fashion here. But as you think about what really matters, especially as we deal with these days in quarantine, it's not the clothes that you have on. It's you communicating. It's your prayer together. It's your strength of mind. It's your character. Those are the things that stay with you long after your clothes and all the other fun things wear out.
Yeah,
So
because in fact, that's what when I went away to college, my father said, I just have one request of you, that you find a church. Like, not study. He gave me none of that kind of advice. He said, because I will have failed you as a father if you do not have your spiritual life together. Because the storms of life blow and they come without warning. And if your soul is not anchored in the Lord, you will drift away. And so, those are the things. And thank you for that reminder, Yusef. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for reminding me, Santita, because I never did as well in school as you did. And I never went to church as often. But I played football.
You got baptized.
I really think I had a better time.
Yes, you did.
I think you did pretty well in school too. You played some football, but you went to UVA. You went on to UVA Law School. That's pretty impressive, right there.
And he was the first football player to be accepted directly into law school from undergrad at UVA. I was very proud.
Wow.
Yes.
Very impressive. So obviously you guys are both very successful professionally, but in your respective professions, social justice and service still plays a huge role in that. Talk to me about how you make sure that that is a part of what you are doing.
Ellie, social justice and service is in our DNA. One of the things I found difficult to reconcile when I made the decision to pursue a career in American business. Again, this is at the beginning of the hour, I talked about how Santita paved the way so that some of us could do what we wanted to do. I always wanted to be a businessman. I used to watch television shows like Dallas, and I wanted to be J.R. Ewing. I wanted to be a big oil man. I wanted to be Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller. All the people, by the way, who were not, known for being in the progressive movement of civil rights. But I wanted to be a businessman. I really, really did. And what I'm grateful to my parents for was they didn't discourage me from me wanting to be who I wanted to be. So I wanted to be, I wanted to take part in the American dream. I wanted to be, in business. And so I did that. And that was difficult to reconcile. One, because the business I chose was a beer business. And coming from the Black church, it was kind of frowned upon to drink at all, let alone be involved in a beer business where you're selling, alcohol to sometimes to neighborhoods that don't have another economic opportunity. But I reconciled that by, I saw myself as having a company of 150 families that we took care of every day. We sent kids to college. We sent kids to high school. We made sure that we had, I was able to create in that organization the kind of country that I want, where we all had healthcare, where we all had paid leave and time off. And so I was able to create a little community of sorts with the people I worked with. So I was able to be a living example in the best way I could. And in fact, I think business people can get a pretty bad rap because they're seen as making decisions based only on dollars. But there is a better way to do it. We just need more people doing it.
Well, that's what made me very proud of the way Yusef, the way my brother conducted himself in business. And our brother Jesse, when he was in Congress, and Jonathan, as he's been in business and as he wrestles with the ministry now, and our sister Jacqueline, who now has a doctorate in education policy. Everybody has looked at doing things, you can do good and you can do well. You can do well and you can do good. And I was most proud to watch Yusef really do well, do good, and have a business in which he saw it as a family endeavor. He tied the American dream to what Dr. King would tell us to do, which is to be fair, be kind, be good. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with that. What we've wanted to do is we fought to raise the floor, not enclose the ceiling. And so for me, Yusef, as the eldest I'm not just the eldest daughter, I'm the eldest. So I think I struggled a lot more. In fact, I know I did. Really trying to figure out how to use my gifts, and really settle into what it is that I really, really wanted to do. And as you can see, I've had a lot of different careers, and I'm comfortable with that now. I don't know if I was as comfortable years ago, didn't quite know how to use all of these gifts. And one of the things that I would do when I was singing with Roberta Flack, which I loved, because she's classically trained, very disciplined musician, and for her background singers in particular, you needed to be studying. You know, you had to be studying voice, you had to be studying music in order to work for her. That was very, very clear. I mean, she's like a dissertation away from her PhD, and she behaved that way. But one of the things that I got from her, from touring with her for years, and touring with others, was that I never really felt comfortable in the nightclubs. I think because of our church background. It was something that made me very uncomfortable, even though this is someone who performed at Carnegie Hall regularly and the great halls of the world. That was okay, but if I had to go to like the Montreux Jazz Festival, which is one of the foremost festivals in the world, it's in a casino. I was like, huh, what am I doing here? This, but I would reconcile it because she also, I always found myself working with people who wanted to do message music and music that was uplifting. Because our father, when we were growing up, campaigned against the vulgar lyrics that are so common now. He foresaw this as a problem 40 years ago. And he said, this is going to flower into something that could be poisonous to the society. And so just whatever it is that I've done, whether it's been, in acting or political commentary on television or on radio or in music, as long as I could connect it to something that would be uplifting to people, that's what I do.
Santita, I want to ask you, I want to rewind a little bit, because the way you got into music, you didn't grow up singing, and you said you had a brief stint with the Chicago Children's Choir, but you were in college. Howard University got that scholarship, and then you were an aide to an Illinois congressman.
Savage, yes.
Out of the blue, you said, I'm going to be a singer.
Out of the blue, I decided that I wanted to do something that I really wanted to do with my life. Because I was going to go to medical school. And I'd taken my MCATs, I'd done well on those and all of that. And I was desperately unhappy. I just knew that this was not going to work for me.
Santita, let me give just a little bit of background. My sister Santita was a National Merit Scholar. She would read 250-page books for breakfast. I mean, she just had that kind of mind. No, we didn't have it, and she had a gift, but she also had this amazingly beautiful singing voice. And I think you kind of had a struggle between your creative and artistic side and that academic side for biology and medicine and mathematics and all these other things you can just master in ways that others couldn't. And, kind of wanting to perform.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And also there were familial expectations, because also I think that as women, and I think you can relate to this, women need as much autonomy as we can get, because it's so hard for us to earn the money that we really need to earn and to get the independence that we really need. In America, we have more opportunity for that than just about any place in the world. And so I did struggle with that. As early as high school, when I went to Whitney Young, as they were beginning, they started an honors program. And I had to choose between choir, and I was doing national music competitions. But I had to make a choice between the honors program, which only had one honors math class, one honors English class, one honors science class. So I had to make a choice, because I really felt that getting an academic scholarship would be easier for me to do than for me to obtain than getting a music scholarship, because musical gifts, my goodness.
Do you regret that?
No. Looking back, no, I don't, because there's so many rich experiences and enriching experiences. In high school at that time, and at that time in my life, and at that time in the life of my family, an academic scholarship is what I needed. I absolutely needed that. And I needed that to help set the pace for my brothers and my sister. So I regret none of that. But I ended up, You know, a friend of mine told me years ago, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. And so I ended up having the career that I've wanted to have, just not all at once. I can look back and say, wow, I've done this. Yes, Yusef, I'm sorry.
So Ellie, I didn't feel any of that. I was absolutely 100% a football scholarship. I was they called us student athletes. I was an athlete student. And I'm so happy, Santita, that you took all the burden of your academic scholarship, for which I was never qualified.
That's not true.
That is not true. Thing. No, I was a good student, but I was never the student in your level. But it's, you know, it's interesting how you can grow up in the same household and just have completely different experiences.
Yeah.
And by her experience, I was allowed at one level to pursue football or to pursue business, or she didn't like nightclubs. I loved them. So
oh, Yusef, stop.
Just because, you know, we have these differences, we can still sit in the same room and laugh, and we can feel differently about things. And our parents can love us the same, and we can love them separately and individually. And I think that's the kind of latitude and space that our parents were able to give us, which is why I'm grateful to them today, because, you know, they didn't force me into a box. I had to do something. I was going to be me, and we still have, each of us has, you know, that spirit of service. So that's not going to change the details of how we choose to live life. We all in the Jackson family have a desire to serve.
And we do that with each other. You know, if you're not serving, what are you doing?
So you're challenging each other.
Always. You know, this ought to be about more than you. This ought to be about serving people and lifting people. If you're not doing that, I can't imagine that. We've all been gifted tremendously. And our brother, when he was in Congress, said something. He said, you know, I'm from a family that's been tremendously gifted. But I found that if we use our gifts for self-aggrandizement to benefit ourselves, we won't be blessed. And so we've just been very blessed to know that, you know, as God has given to us, we give to people. God gives through us to other people.
And don't you find you get a lot more out of service than what you're giving?
I think so. Yusef?
Service is life. I mean, it is the very breath. If nothing else, the last 9 weeks has taught us that little part, as we have seen some of the devastation that our brothers and sisters and neighbors have felt in this country and around the world. And at the same time, we see some of the amazing silver linings that come from this awful situation, which is we probably eat together more, we probably pray together more, we probably connect together more in ways small and big. But yes.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of singer questions for you. First, let's
Yusef, I'm gonna.
Yeah, well, this one's specifically for you, Yusef. What is your passion and what inspires you?
Oh my gosh. So, you know, so my life is different these days. I have 5 children, and I have to say that I place all of my passion these days into my children, and inspiring in them our sense of service. That's more challenging because, you know, they don't see their dad on television every night as I did. It was easy to see my father and what he was doing. It's harder for them to see me that way. But I think, you know, I've been opening up COVID-19 testing sites in the city of Chicago over the last several weeks in a partnership with Sean Penn's Charity Corps in the city of Chicago and the Rainbow Push Coalition. So they've seen that. But it's absolutely raising my children and also continuing to find ways, you know, to serve our community.
And Yusef, just following up on the COVID-19 testing sites, I know obviously more tests in the area, that's going to be good for the community, but long-term, what do you hope that partnership leads to?
Yeah, no, I hope that the partnership continues to expand into contact tracing, because the objective is until we have a vaccine, it's going to be impossible to open up society as we used to know it. I mean, society will change, I think, for the better, actually, at the end of the day, because I believe in our humanity that much. But before we can touch each other again in the free way that we used to, we're going to have a vaccine. In the meantime, the only thing we can do is contact, trace, and distance.
Yeah. Santita, I have a question for you from one of our singers. How do you keep progressing? Because I'm a young female singer myself, and I want to keep pushing and make my talents known.
Practice, 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 but perfect practice helps to perfect the voice. Use it in every way that you can. I believe that you need to vocalize every day, but keep your ear open for all kinds of music. That was something that my parents were our parents were great about allowing me to love all kinds of music. You know, that was something, and in fact, that was something that our parents encouraged. Just love it all. You can't segregate the ear because the ear doesn't segregate. But what you need to do, the reason I say that it's important to get exposure to as much music as you can, because as you develop as a singer, you pull different elements from different kinds of music. I'm a European classically trained singer, but I also grew up in Black church. And so I get those elements. But then I love Barbra Streisand because she fuses so many different elements. I love Roberta Flack because she fuses so many different elements. I love Gladys Knight. I love Patsy Cline. I love the Judds. I love Elton John. I was going to marry him, but that's another story. You know, I love music. I love Mozart. I love Bach. I love it all. I love it all. So open your ear and listen, but also strive to find a great vocal teacher and a great vocal coach. A great vocal teacher will teach you technique, because some days the voice, as you well know, is just not there. It's just not. But if you have the technique, you can soldier through. A coach will help you to find yourself, help you to shape yourself, help you to find a style. And you'll find as you continue to develop as a singer that you'll do that all the time. Every great singer I know vocalizes 5 to 7 times a week. And Miss Flack had a stroke about 3 years ago. But up until then, she had a standing appointment with her voice teacher every Thursday.
Wow, even still.
And so into her 80s, her voice was pristine. And you could always tell, you can always tell.
You know, Santita, one of the things you told me that I actually live as a life standard, and I attribute the quote to you, although I think it's not from you, but you taught it to me, and you said, if I mispractice one day, I can hear it. If I mispractice 2 days, then you can hear it.
Yes. Yes. And that is from a famous pianist, and that is his name escapes my attention at the moment. I don't know if it was Van Cliburn or someone of that ilk, but that's true. But that's why I think that if you're going to master anything, what is it? Malcolm Gladwell said you need 10,000 hours. And we've seen our father master his craft. You can't outwork him. And I think that's why we all work so hard. Our mother, her ministry has been her family and serving people. You can't outwork them. And they're always reading, they're always soaking up information. And even as you develop as an artist, I think it's one of the things I learned from watching Roberta Flack, who got a full scholarship to college at 13. Brilliant, academically brilliant woman. Just remaining open, remaining curious, and remaining literate. Reading, being exposed to the arts, and being appreciative of what everybody does. That's one of the things that we've learned in this COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the reasons I'm so proud of our brother Yusef, because this has been almost an obsession for all of us to be safe, not just his family, the community. You appreciate everybody's contribution to a society, right? Now we know how essential the housekeeper in the hospital is, the janitorial staff, the bus driver, your Uber driver, the person who operates a hot dog stand, the waiters and cooks in the restaurants. A lot of people who we've overlooked are actually essential. And I think that everything that you experience in life is essential, and it's essential to you becoming a great artist.
Well, as we wrap up our discussion, which I'm so sad to say, time is almost up, any final words of wisdom for our kids? Your last words that you want to impart on our next generation?
I had been thinking about this, but my sister Santita got me on something. I'll let her take this question. But, as she talked about the people on the front lines of this pandemic, who we have at times not recognized, but we're seeing how valuable they are now as they give their lives so that we may live better. Both of our grandmothers, my grandmother on my mother's side worked in food service, never made more than $17,000 a year. My grandmother, my father's side, his mother, was a beautician. So we come from working class roots who worked on the front lines. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It's all about where you're going.
And your values. You know, I think that what we have to do is lift up the values. It's not about the money that you make, really, because money comes and goes. It really does. What matters are your values. And I think that they need to be rooted in goodness. I'm a person, and as is my brother, we're people of faith. You know, we believe in God. And even if that is not your religious commitment or your spiritual commitment, I hope that we can give this to the young people, that you should never, 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 never give up. That's not original to me. That's from Winston Churchill. And just really, this comes from our mother, be a good person. Work on being a good person. Work on being good to others. Work on being good to yourself. So God bless you.
Thank you so much. Some great words of wisdom. We so appreciate your time today and so happy to see you. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, choir.
Thank you. We love you, young people. We love you. We love you, Ellie. We love you, Sarah and Pam, and everybody who's made this work today. Thank you, Yusef, for inviting me.
Thank you, team.